Hi and welcome to Family Sociology. Now we're going to look at the lone parent family. Okay, in recent years, the lone parent family has been among the fastest growing family type in Canada. Yet, in many ways, this represents a diverse group. There are various routes to get to lone parenthood. There's never married, there's divorced, widowhood. Now, some factors affecting these families are specific to their mode of formation, while others are affected at all. Both aspects need to be explored, and this topic is particularly important for everyone since some either already or will become a lone parent. In addition, if they find work in people-oriented services, their client populations will undoubtedly include an increasing number of single-parented families. Okay, so the lone parent family in Canada, we're going to start there just as a look. Let's define it. Canada's definition for lone parented family: a mother or a father with no spouse or common law partner present, living in the dwelling with one or more children. So let's look at it as a comparison. So in 1961, 8.4% of all census families were lone parent families. In 2016, 17% of all census families were lone parent families. One aspect that occurs to increase that number of single-parented families was the Divorce Act of 1968. That's where they introduced what was known as the no-fault principle of marriage. Directly after this act, the number of divorces dramatically increased, therefore single-parented numbers increased. Now, there's two explanations for this increase, and they include more women pursuing post-secondary education and their role in the paid workforce. Now, there were amendments made to the Divorce Act in 1985, and what it really did was to shorten the wait times for divorces to 1 year. And it produced another huge jump in divorces. Now, this issue associated with divorce will be covered more completely in the next chapter. We can touch on, because it used to be a bigger issue and it's less of an issue, although we'll still address it, and that is teen pregnancies. Some contribution to the single-parented family. They're not as frequent as 30 and 40 years ago. Teens tend not to marry, but put their child up for adoption. Thus their contribution to the single-parented family. Now, the overall completion of family was changing and accepting more variations than just the nuclear family. So a review of the infographic, I think I put it in behind me. If not, it's in your textbook. It points out that the green, the top left, lone parents in 1931 were 75% based on widowhood. Due to the death during childhood, men were killed more in the wars. And then the divorce rates were lower. Unmarried, single-parented people were few. 2011, 8 of 10 lone parent families headed by a woman. Men, as lone parents, have varied from the high of 28%, mostly due to the maternal mortality earlier in the century. By 2011, 20% of single-parent families are parented by men. If we consider culture and look at immigrants and indigenous people, there can have an impact on lone parent families. Some cultures are more accepting and have different stages of acceptance of these milestones. Many families spend some time as a lone parent family before, after, or between two-parent episodes. Therefore, these data that we look at need to be considered with this in mind. The stats on lone parents are dynamic, and they don't change much over the time. So if we look at the lone parent and what the life cycle is like, how one gets to be a lone parent, and it can be, like I said, varied. And as I mentioned, it could be that you've never been married but you had a child, or you've ended a relationship and you've got the child, or your spouse passed away and that was widowed. Those are three primary ways that parents become lone parents. The other thing we can point out, and it's stats supported, of course, that most of single parent families are women. Now, what's really important here is age is important, especially being a teen parent. Teens have many other critical issues to address, employment, education, finding out who you are, your identity, independence. Older single mothers are more likely to have finished their schooling and have their careers in order. They are less likely to compromise on getting married. They know what they want and they won't give it up. Now, some women will seek artificial insemination or an arrange to have a man father a child. They're not looking for the nuclear family. Instead, they're looking to deliberately be a single mother. Now, divorce and widowhood evolves many emotions, of course, the good and the bad. And again, age can play a role here. How old at the divorce or widowhood can have a big influence. This can lead to financial changes or a standard of living issues. We also need to consider the children in these lone parent families. Their age and developmental and emotional needs are involved in the mix of lone parenthood families. So how long does it last? Now, this is not an easy question to answer, of course. Generally, younger lone parents are lone parents for shorter periods of time than older widowed mothers. The teen mothers will usually marry before the age of 30, and children's age does play a role here. Now, as we've done in the past with other chapters, we'll do here, and we're going to look at the sociological perspectives on lone parenthood. As much as lone parenting is a personal experience, there is also a social context to lone parenting. And we're going to look at some of the sociological perspectives to see what is some of this context. And we'll start, as we often do, with structural functionalism. These folks consider the function of social structures, of which family is a social structure in society. So some structural functionalists see lone parenting as partially dysfunctional, as they do not produce their own children anymore, and they see that in most cases the family functions are difficult to achieve, or they're not achieved at all because we don't have two parents playing the roles in this. Other structural functionalists see that the social conditions, the economics, the healthcare, education, can either help or hinder lone parented families. Moving to conflict theory, and as usual, conflict considers the inequity and the access to resources that play a role here, often resulting in lone parented families needing to utilize social welfare systems, and that further can alienate them. Feminists, their focus is on predominantly how most lone parent families are led by women, and the overall disadvantages their status has in society. Symbolic interactionalism, well, this being our only face-to-face theory, their interest is to consider how do lone parent families manage the juggling of home, work, and childcare. What additions informally, what addition to the informal family supports do they depend on? Maybe their family or friends. The ecological theory, well, they consider the relationship between the lone parent family and the interaction between other aspects of society. So what are, the issues that we might experience as a lone parent family, what might they include? Now, again, I think I put it up behind me here, figure 9.1, where the average income after taxes by economic family types. So if we look at economics, the female lone parents are at risk of living in poverty. Working lone mothers experienced a great deal of tension in juggling work, family, and daycare. Many lone mothers are discouraged from working by the lack of available and affordable childcare. In addition, higher educational levels and earning capacity has lessened the need for social assistance. The development of social assistance began in 1966 with the Canadian Assistance Plan to assist single-parented families to receive benefits until their children hit age 18. The 1980s and the 1990s, the assistance was altered and termed workfare or welfare to work, and tended to be a big help. These changes were not that helpful to single mothers, though. In 1998, the federal government provided increased support to lone-parented families with the introduction to the National Child Benefit. Now, the National Child Benefit was to reduce child poverty, reduce this overlap in social assistance programs, and to encourage parents to find jobs. Available and affordable child care is still one of the biggest impediments to finding and maintaining work. Family and friends can help and can do a lot to help. However, the minimum wage and the typical hours create obvious challenges. Housing is one of those challenges, and housing is the single largest expense for most single mothers and may be difficult to find. Single mothers are more likely than others to live in low-income areas for longer periods of time. Most can't afford to buy a house and tend to live in apartments, row housing, or co-op housing. For the benefit of children, space is important. A play area, some proximity to schools, medical stores, and other needed services. However, low-income areas are not always very close or convenient to necessities. Low-income housing areas you have privacy issues, you have stigma. There are areas in our geographic area which are generally inhabited by low-income folks, and there are stigmas attached to that. And there's stigmas to single moms and children in some instances. So what role could social supports play? Well, both lone fathers and lone mothers have higher rates of mood and substance abuse disorders than married people. The majority of single parents report adequate contact with others, with a minority responding to be very lonely. The social support significantly reduced the likelihood of these disorders, more of the protective factors for lone fathers than there are for lone mothers, which is surprising given there's far more lone mothers. Social support can be separated into two areas. The first area is known as, we can consider how supportive is the society, as a whole. Does the society have a support for lone families? And the second is the immediate sources of emotional and practical help. There's been an explosion of internet websites devoted to lone parenting, whether that's lone parenting and dating, lone parenting and support. There are blogs and vlogs. That's actually a fairly topical issue among single-parented families. Let's consider family life. Now, there's two aspects of family life that are affected by lone parenthood: relationships within the single-parent family and relationships within families formed by adult children of single parents. Now, there's a few terms that we can look at that are sociological terms applied in the Family Sociology Forum. One is known as role strain. Now, role strain is more likely in low-parent families, much juggling of responsibilities. Single parents are less likely to be emotionally supportive to their children because, there's oftentimes lots of time compression. So there's harsher punishment in some cases, less parental supervision in some cases, and children have less success at school in some circumstances. Now, These issues are not solely a single parenthood issue. It is much more complex than that, and however, statistically, this does bear out. Individuals who grew up in lone parent families because of divorce are more likely to have formed partnerships, become a couple at an earlier age than children not born into a lone parent family or raised in a lone parent family. So are children really that are in a lone parent family, are they at greater risk, really? Well, there are several explanations that account for the differences between children from lone parent families and stable two-parent families. Some of the difficulty results from economic hardships. The quality of parenting may have an effect. And of course, stress can create many problems. Loss of contact with non-residential parent. Children that witness conflict in the family can lead to emotional and behavioral problems. There's a tendency that stereotyping with academic, with academic, emotional, and behavioral issues can be and is static and still an issue. So there is some of the things that we associate with being in a lone parent family, and particularly the effect on children, it doesn't apply to all families. However, statistically, it happens to more than we might want to accept. Along with lone parent families is the potential for risk of food insecurity. Food insecurity, or the limited or uncertain availability of nutritional, adequate, safe food. This does have an impact on educational success. Remember with the assignment doing on Quintil 1, that's part of where you'll see some of the struggles for Bill and Ann and their kids. The problem with these explanations is that they do not apply to all families. They provide only partial answers. Lone parent families are wide and varied and are quite different histories, so it's difficult to carte blanche sort of paint them with the same statistics. Young people are more likely today to live, at least for a time, with a single parent. These explanations also fail to account for the influence, for good or ill, of extended family members and friends. Now there's a special worry, or the teenage mother, a woman who has her first birth under the age of 20. There are no epidemics of teen births. In 2012, just 3.4% of all Canadian births were of teen births. More common among Aboriginal people than in the rest of the Canadian population. There are concerns and questions over teen births, and they focus on there being fewer younger teen births. The younger group, they often haven't finished growing up physically and have the least amount of education and seem likeliest to live in poverty. Youngest teen mothers often live at home with their parents. Once the baby is born, teen mothers may have difficulty returning to school. The kind of support young teens receive from their own parents and other relatives may prove crucial for their future success. These supports are crucial and include the important life chances, education. Babysitting, family, financial support can all contribute to getting a young teen mother into school. However, support can bring disagreements and boundary issues, role confusion, and the who am I issues. It's a difficult time to be bringing a new baby into one's life. Even when teen mothers marry, it rarely improves their financial status because of their husband's poor prospects. Now, it's been referenced a bit, and I'm going to emphasize a little bit here, and that is the lone father. Proportion of lone parent fathers is growing. In 2011, nearly 1 in 5 single parents were men, mainly because mothers are less frequently being awarded sole custody of children following a breakdown of a relationship or a marriage. Lone parent families, men tend to become single parents in the middle to late years of the life cycle. Few are in their teens or in their 20s. Children of lone parent fathers tend to be older. There are some similarities. There are more similarities than differences between lone mothers and lone fathers. Really, no difference regarding the children's psychological adjustments or social success or the level of stress alone mothers and lone fathers will experience. Single fathers, are more so than single mothers, are expected to be the sole economic support for families. So what about the future? Well, the forecasts suggest an increase in the number of single-parented families, especially as a result of divorce. The level of poverty is high among single parents, and that has far-reaching effects on children's physical and intellectual development. To offset some of the challenges, more acceptable and affordable childcare options are needed. Lone parent families are increasing and can be part of many children's experience, so more additional support is needed to support those children. In addition, more pathways to educational opportunities for lone parent mothers in particular, thus increasing prospects for employment and career. Fathers are an important part of children's development. Perhaps there will be more means of nurturing, and joint and shared custody might contribute to that. Many single parents receive much emotional and practical supports from their extended families. Future success for lone parents and their children may depend more on these supports. It's important, especially for the sake of children, to eliminate stigma against single-parented families that remain in society. Raise further the status of lone parent families as it appears it will be around in the future. All right, everybody. That kind of sums up the Lone Parent Review. I hope this has been helpful for you, and I look forward to seeing you in the next video. Bye now, and good luck.